So we're going to uncover some of the myths surrounding mental health. These myths, as you're all well aware, they really can lead to negative stigma and dangerous stereotyping. And in our keynote, I was reminded, because I raised my hand as someone who's felt the shame around my own mental health needs at times. So let's go ahead and uncover these myths. So we have individuals experiencing significant mental illness. Is that the term? Does mental health describe that group of individuals? Requires individual treatment or therapy. Does mental health require individual treatment or therapy? Another myth, it is the family's responsibility to be the sole support for the mental health of their child. We hope that's not true. Social and emotional learning is provided by specialists, such as school counselors. We've already talked about where the ownership needs to live, ideally, is with everyone. So now we're going to do some myth busting. Some of you may have watched that show before. I always liked that show. So let's think about this. Instead of individuals experiencing significant mental illness, we're going to think of mental health as a dimension of overall health that ranges from high-level wellness to severe illness. Mental health is a continuum, and we may fall at different points within that continuum on different days, different months, different years, with different circumstances. Universal strategies promote the social and emotional competence, well-being, and development of all students. This is a universal need. This is not, yes, sometimes there are mental health needs that require individual therapy, but we all need universal supports in order for us to have strong mental health and wellness. Relationships, engagements, resiliency, mental health, education, stigma reduction, safe, active, and positive school climate, are all important aspects of universal practice. Again, something everyone in the community of learners needs to be experiencing, from staff to students to families. Social and emotional learning are all important aspects of universal practice. So you can see where we're going here with this. This is a universal need. So by clearing up the misunderstandings about terms and acronyms, we're already leaning into being more culturally responsive. So here's a connection to equity and culturally responsive practices. So in addition, think about either Jeopardy or the myths and facts. Which of those two might be more might your community be more responsive to? If you think about these two strategies, is there one that would be a better fit for a staff meeting or a family night? Even though those might look a little different than before, you can do it virtually because we did it. All right, let's go ahead and cover up those myths. And let's make sure that we continue to move forward in helping build up the fact knowledge base of our communities around mental health and what that really means. Retrieval practice, which you can see is linked on this slide. You can always Google it. Not right now, I'm sure you're not going to leave my screen. It's because you're going to need to look at this one. This one actually, if you can get your eyes out there, you're going to need to do a little bit of looking. It's an evidence-based learning strategy where the focus is on getting information out. Now, when you visit the website linked on the page, you're going to see lots of research. But one of the things that they say, their website actually states, teachers often use retrieval practice in their classrooms by simply asking questions throughout their lessons and calling on students to provide a response. Sometimes we think about that as a cold call. Teachers in the focus group for retrieval practice, teachers in our focus groups said that they preferred retrieval practice strategies because they engage the entire class. The standard cold calling procedure, on the other hand, allows students who were not called to be off the hook. Now that's what they said, but I also want us to think about off the hook may mean that we're also sort of dismissing that student's opportunity to be a part of the conversation, to be a part of having the answer, to feel that success. By engaging every student in retrieval practice, every student reaps its benefits for long-term learning. And it was complete coincidence that just a little bit earlier in our keynote, we had a really great example of how you might also use a little bit of a pre-teach for a student so that they can be really successful in retrieval practice. It really can help build confidence and understanding. And we're going to be practicing it just a little bit. So it's not a test, although we can use it for formative assessment data. But this is really about what can I hold in my short-term memory right now. Listen carefully as I read the following passage to you. You might even want to jot down some notes because this is an oral activity where we're asking you auditorily to pay attention to some terms. TSS is an innovation in which schools infuse the core values of safety, trust, choice, collaboration, and empowerment into their multi-level system of supports, practices, assessments, and program adjustments. Exposure to traumatic events in childhood is extraordinarily common. Schools have a great ability to prevent and mitigate the impacts of traumatic exposure on our youth. Schools can become a protective factor for these students and increase the social and emotional and academic skills of the entire school body. TSS acknowledges the high prevalence of traumatic exposure for students, the importance of staff well-being, and strives to meet the unique needs of all learners. The resource for what I just read to you that was used in this reading is cited at the bottom of the page. All right, let's move on to the next part of retrieval practice. I want you to take a moment and jot down as many of those core values of trauma-sensitive schools that you can retrieve from the last slide in the reading. I'll give you about 30 seconds to see what you can remember. Remember, this is not a test. We're literally practicing your neural pathways, retrieving this information so that the next time you get asked this question, it comes just a little bit. It's kind of like when you're making a path in the woods and over time, you can actually see where the path is. That's exactly what we're doing in brains when we use retrieval practice as a strategy. So let's see what you remember. Safety is a core value. Trust, empowerment, choice, and collaboration. These are the 5 core values of trauma-sensitive schools, also known as TSS. If we were to continue this throughout the rest of this session, we would stop and I would come back and see how many you could remember and what you could retrieve. If we were in a room where we could see each other, we might even turn to a partner, or I might put you in a breakout room and see how many you can remember with a collaborative group. So we know that another really important point about TSS, which isn't on this slide, is that it is a process, not a product. So when we're speaking about TSS or trauma-sensitive schools, it's a way of being. It's not something that we do. We don't do TSS, or it's not a curriculum. It is a process that is built on these 5 core values. So just like PBIS, which is a framework, not a practice, we want to avoid doing PBIS or doing TSS. We want to follow the framework and the components of the framework, or the steps in the process to embed the critical components of each term into our system. So we use practices as a way of enacting the process, and that can be your own formative assessment. If you hear that kind of language, it might mean that there's some learning that can still happen around this process that you can support. What might be a culturally responsive practice that you have used to support collaboration among your students? When you think about one of the core values, Does the teaching of the classroom matrix support how students collaborate in an equitable and culturally responsive way? Do these collaboration practices support the safety that students and families feel? So as you use these terms, it's a way for you to do a little bit of checking on your own culturally responsive practices that are embedded within the process of trauma-sensitive schooling. So, SEL, another term that we hear a lot about. We hear that term a lot, SEL, but what does it really mean? So this is actually probably one of the oldest strategies in our toolkit, but it's an oldie but goodie. Paper pencil type word games like word searches, crossword puzzles, word scrambles, those can be really great for teaching vocabulary as well as reviewing new vocabulary. So it might be a way to use retrieval practice through a worksheet. Maybe after you've already done some type of learning at this staff meeting, next month you might give them a little word search. So there is a link to some websites that provide some worksheet and word game kind of makers. Our last acronym is social emotional learning. And again, we often will hear that we do SEL as a practice. At our school, we do SEL. But in reality, let's make sure we understand and know the DPI definition of social emotional learning, or SEL. Social emotional learning is the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to, and then there's 5 bullet points: understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. And I'm making a connection again to our keynote speakers, to the information that we were able to learn or be reminded of in terms of hormones and our body chemistry, and how when we are experiencing stress hormones, these are really, really challenging, right? And so that's how these terms really do work together. The processes work together. So the Wisconsin Department of Instruction has identified, with the guidance of our national partners, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They've written a comprehensive guide that acknowledge that these competencies are lifelong skills and essential for everyone. Again, I'm hearing universal. Think about how these SEL competencies are connected to equity as you look at this slide. So the guide addresses why social and emotional learning in schools is essential to student success. It defines SEL, and it provides educators with common language, which is part of systemic implementation. The SEL competencies are designed to be an additive model rather than replace skills taught by families and communities. So it's not a replacement of, it's in addition to. And the competencies outline a set of skills educators, youth service professionals, families, and students can access and build upon together. So now we're really able to also support multiple stakeholders in our learning community. So take a look at the word search. See if you can find, just by using your eyes, can you jot down any of the words that are on the right? Some of you your eyes go right to the words. I know sometimes there's games where it says, if you see this one first, that defines you. I don't know if this isn't set up for that. So as you're just looking for a few of the words, the DPI has developed social and emotional learning competencies for pre-K to adult. And until now, when this was released, no comprehensive developmentally appropriate SEL competencies have been available to all educators and out of school time programs in the state. Long thought to be the responsibility of only pupil service staff or those student service people, these competencies support the belief that SEL skills are best learned when all adults are teaching, providing opportunities for practice, modeling, and reinforcing these skills throughout the day. Universal owned by everyone, experienced by all. All right, there's just a few of them. I bet you got more than 3. At the Wisconsin RTI Center, we support schools in putting all of those potentially siloed and segregated efforts together. Integrate the core components of these frameworks called RTI in reading and math and positive behavior intervention supports with CR, culturally responsiveness, prioritized throughout, and in an effort to really reach the vision we call an equitable multi-level system of supports. So an e-MLSS ensures that institutions, districts, and schools are systematically providing equitable services, equitable practices, and equitable resources to all students based upon their responsiveness to effective instruction and intervention. The center's equitable multi-level system of support vision is aligned to Wisconsin's vision of college and career readiness. And more specifically, here is the attempt of the DPI to connect behavior to college and career readiness. Some assume that college and career readiness is just about academics, but our state's vision makes it clear that it's also about social emotional learning and behavior. And as a result, college and career readiness requires attention to all 3. So we're going to go through these in just a moment, the knowledge, skills, and habits. Throughout every year of a child's public school experience, they take all the years that a child is in public school to develop these fully. So the last strategy is actually going to focus on CCR, or college career readiness proficiencies and attributes that come from rigorous, rich, and well-rounded public school experiences. So I'm going to have you read those 3 definitions of knowledge, skills, and habits to yourself. Students receive equitable access to the academic content is the knowledge. School and classroom-wide behavioral expectations promote the application of these skills, are the skills. And positive behavioral habits lead to responsibility, perseverance, adaptability, and leadership. Those are the habits that we are helping develop through all 12 years. All right, we're going to use a cloze activity now to help, again, retrieve those definitions of knowledge, skills, and habits as they relate to college career readiness, and particularly the behavior and the social emotional learning competencies that students are going to need in order to be college and career ready. So blank receive equitable access to the academic blank. School and classroom-wide behavioral blank promote of these skills. Do you remember what goes there? And positive behavioral blank lead to responsibility, perseverance, adaptability, and leadership. Again, I see these up on walls, I see them posters, I see this in lots of slideshows, but do we really understand what this means and how we, the adults, how do the adult practices ensure that all students have access, opportunity, and will be able to have the knowledge, skills, and habits, acquire them? So now if we were face-to-face, I'd have y'all read these out loud to me. So if you're in your room all by yourself, just come on, shout it out for me, even though I can't hear you. Read the sentences with me. It helps them get in our brains. So knowledge is students receive equitable access to the academic content. Skills, the school and classroom-wide behavioral expectations promote the application of these skills. And habits, positive behavioral habits lead to responsibility, perseverance, adaptability, and leadership. We know that cloze reading is an evidence-based strategy that has shown to improve comprehension and understanding for adult learners as well as children learners. It supports other skills and strategies such as using context clues and language skills. It also supports new vocabulary practice and can even be used as a retrieval practice, which it was hopefully for you today. Lastly, it is a great tool to gather formative assessment data. So it might be a way for you to, just put a few terms out there at different staff meetings or community events, and over time, see if you can get the answers to be more consistent without a lot of help and support.